Sentry mode activated. Target acquired.
Hey there, hunters, and welcome back to, I guess it's still a Gunner's Guild. There's guns in this game too, so I'm counting it. Anyway, today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be briefly reviewing a game, which is Hellpoint, developed by Cradle Games, published by Tiny Build. I'm a sucker for Souls games, plus it's cosmic horror and sci-fi. It checks all my boxes, dude. So let's do this thing. So I'm going to be starting with a category and do the good stuff first and then dive into the bad things, and that way I think it's a little bit better to go about it. But let's get the basics out of the way. It's a Souls-like game. It's got all the basics of a Souls-like game. You got respawning enemies, bonfires, the same stat block, equipment layouts, all that stuff. You die and then you leave your body behind. You have to collect your money. Although in this, you actually leave a ghost in the world you have to fight, which is cool. I'm not going to go much into that. It's a Souls game. You know what a Souls game is. Let's do everything else. So first, visually, the game isn't anything too impressive, but honestly I'm not expecting multi-million-dollar levels of budget here, and it doesn't really bother me. The lighting is actually fairly decent, which I think is the most important part of graphics anyway, so it does a good enough job at capturing the vibe and the tone of the game. As I'm looking at it, it actually only takes 5 gigs too, and after all the patches and updates, I'm surprised it crams so much into 5 gigs. That being said, the textures are pretty basic. It kind of looks like a PS3 game. Also, the music is basically non-existent. It's only atmospheric tones. There's no crazy cool boss themes and stuff like a Souls game has, which is kind of a letdown for most people. Games tend to be more memorable if they have some killer soundtracks. About the updates and stuff, they do actually patch the game on a pretty regular basis, it seems. It's been out for a few weeks now and there's been many patches. They kind of rolled out the multiplayer functionality, fixed some bosses, fixed some co-op issues, so that's all good. Active developers is always a good thing for a game, so this game's probably going to be different by the time you guys play it, if you're going to. Anyway, let's get into the meat of the Souls games, which is going to be your character growth, stats, equipment, and combat. Characteristics are pretty much exactly what you'd expect from a Souls game, and the stats do exactly what you think they do. Strength scales heavy weapons, finesse scales light weapons, cognition scales gun, occult stuff scales magic. There's equipment load, stamina, HP, energy as well, all that stuff, pretty obvious. Armor is exactly like Souls games too. There's a few sets with varying resistances and weight which affect your roll, but nothing really special like with passives or abilities attached to them as far as I could see. What does stand out though are the weapons. Now you can't upgrade weapons by using special chips that increase scaling with certain attributes and apply elemental damages, but you upgrade the chips themselves, not the weapons. So you kind of swap the chip to whatever weapon you feel like using, which is very nice for trying out new stuff. The other unique feature here is the weapon leveling system. The more you use weapons, you gain experience to them, kind of like a familiarity thing, and it will unlock new passive and active abilities for the weapons, which make them way more unique. This is probably my favorite part of the game, just using whatever weapons and finding out what abilities they got. So there's a bunch of like sword weapons, but they're not all going to have the same abilities. So, there's actually a pretty good variety of stuff here, which is really fun. Catalysts for magic and even guns have the same features, unlocking new spells and fire modes. The downside here is that, at least for magic and gun options, there's not really much diversity. There's only like 3 guns with an alternate elemental of each, which is a little sad. Same for catalysts, there's 3 types, but 1 for each element. So while there's 9 total, all 3 cubes have the same spells, just of alternate elements. All 3 staves share the exact same spells, and all 3 of the gloves share the same. So you're not really going to be seeing anything too unique there. The melee side, there's way more options, and it's a lot more unique too. But scaling for weapons seems a little odd. Like, they didn't really do a whole lot of damage compared to like your basic swings, and it would cost a ton of energy, or the animation times would be kind of insane. There are some good ones, don't worry. Like, backstab on the daggers are insanely strong, and there's way more unique melee weapons than ranged ones, so I wouldn't say it's a huge downside since most people play melee anyway. That's basically kind of it for character growth. There's some like modules you can apply to yourself, which are pretty plain. They just add passive bonus to stats or something. The only really interesting one is your energy leech one, which, it's fairly basic. The weapons definitely got the bulk of the treatment here, but that's pretty much all for all your character growth. So let's get into the combat. First thing you'll notice right away is that combat is pretty clunky. Okay, it's super clunky. Hitboxes are kind of weird. Everything is kind of stiff. Animations have long startup times. So trying to get in a few swings on an enemy can be really tough. Some enemies, like the Sentinels, have almost no ending lag on their attacks, and there's like no way to get in some damage without a shield. And come on, who uses a shield, am I right? There's also not a whole lot of enemy diversity, which is a shame because there's so many possibilities with this whole theme here of cosmic horror. You could do anything. You know, like in most of these games, some early bosses become normal enemies later. Yeah, this is like that, but every single boss. Like outside the 3 cosmic gods and the final boss, every boss is also like an elite enemy you see on the map, which kind of got old after a while. And I swear, there's less than like 20 different enemies in the game, so it gets rather stale. Once you figure out how to fight like the few enemies there are, it's just that over and over and over again. And like a whole area of the map will be condensed to like 3 different enemies, and that's it. So unfortunately, the combat is actually the weakest part of the game, I feel. The bosses aren't particularly challenging outside the final bosses, which I won't spoil because those kind of get crazy. But like the cosmic gods and everyone before them is pretty simple. You know, you strafe to the side, poke their bum after an attack, that kind of thing. The AI isn't particularly bright in this game either. Enemies kind of lose sight of you after you go behind an object and don't really pursue you at all. They often jump off cliffs. It's all pretty janky. Combat is easily my biggest gripe about this game, so if you're looking for something with smooth and rewarding combat, you're not really going to find it here. I wanted to start with good aspects, but honestly, there's not a whole lot of good or depth here at all. Overall, it's a pretty big downside. I'm not a huge fan of the combat, even though it has some good ideas. I don't think it was implemented very well. However, Hellpoint does have some strong points, mainly the exploration and the environments. A lot of Souls clones really fall flat here with their worlds, which is a large part of what made the original Demon Souls and Dark Souls so good. Hellpoint does this exceptionally well. There's tons of secret doors, hidden areas, all rewarding you with equipments, key items, accesses to early places, materials, currency, you name it. It feels very rewarding to actually take your time, check all the corners, break every box, press every wall like it's fucking Wolfenstein. Shortcuts and optional ways to enter areas are also plentiful, so chances are players aren't going to be taking the same pathway as everyone else. The openness of the game actually makes it feel much larger than it is. I keep finding myself wandering into a new zone or a new area, making notes, and then going back to finish the previous area I hadn't finished. This eventually got me very confused because there's no map like in most Souls games, so I had to keep everything in my memory. Dude, there's so many freaking paths, I got so lost. Something else that's kind of odd in a good way is that there's multiple ways to attain the same items in a game. Like you can find equipment in areas, find the crafting recipes to make that equipment, or get the equipment out of bosses at times. There's also multiples of some armor sets, equipments around, and stuff like that. So it's kind of like the devs didn't expect everyone to get every single secret, so they just kind of make duplicates of items and added them all around the world. So you could hit most things, but you're not expected to get everything. Unlike other Souls games where basically every item had a very specific spot where it was attained at, not here. Most items have 2 or 3 ways to get them, which is cool at first, but then, you know, when you pick up the same item for the 3rd time, it's kind of like, okay, well, I don't really need that. And going back and doing stuff on New Game Plus, it's kind of like, okay, why would I pick up anything at this point? Now, another interesting feature is their orbit system. The station you're on, it orbits a black hole to recharge its batteries or energy or whatever. And twice per orbit, when the station is the closest to this black hole, there's a phenomenon known as the Accretion Storm. And this spawns demons all over the station. This time, you'll see this glowy red part on your clock, and it spawns special horde events on the maps that you kind of need to find and do. Completing these waves of enemies gives you special rewards, you know, kind of stuff what you expect, so that's kind of always fun. You can go and backtrack and do things that you might have missed during these Accretion Storms. And then there's this black hole dial thing. In the arcology, there's these weird eye monoliths that you have to move with codes that you find in hidden areas in the games. And when you move them, it moves this dial on your compass. And when the black hole and the dial meet up, special gates are going to be opened up that would normally be blocked off, allowing you to get special items, shortcuts, stuff like that. It's really cool thematically and really helps flesh out the world building. Unfortunately, most players probably aren't going to be using this, and you don't really have to complete the game, so I think it's going to kind of fall by the wayside and most people won't know about it. Plus, I don't think there's anything unique to getting in these black hole areas that you can't get somewhere else in the game. So unfortunately, it's not going to be fleshed out as much as I thought it would be. Something else that's really interesting is that each of the cosmic gods kind of control territory on the space station, and when you kill them, their minions go away and get replaced by other deities' minions. So depending on the order in which you kill them, because that's also entirely up to you, your areas will have different spawns than other people. Just another nice touch. Now, the story doesn't seem to be a focus in most Souls-like games, but Hellpoint at least takes a bit more of a hands-on approach to kind of fill in the gaps. Your whole job is to collect data and information on what happened, so you'll often need to be reading computer logs, memories of people, notes left behind, and stuff like that to obtain data, which is actually what you need to finish the game. So you kind of sort of figure out what's happening, what's going on, and your part in all this by the end of it. Unlike other Souls games where it kind of leaves everything kind of up to interpretation or figuring out hidden meanings of, this is a bit more direct. Hellpoint does have an array of NPCs and side quests you can complete for more items and more endings to the game as well. I believe there are 4 or 5 endings you can do, which is cool for completionists. My first playthrough took me about 20 hours, which is pretty solid length for a game. If I wanted to get all these other endings, I could probably see 40 or 50 hours out of it. Though I don't think I need to spend anywhere near as much time finding secrets and stuff, since there's not much of a reason to get the same items again. I'd probably just blow through it really quick. Now, as far as bugs and crashes go, I found my game to be pretty stable. The only bugs I found were sometimes I would randomly attain gear out of nowhere, which was odd, but I wasn't really complaining. And I had some weird visual stuff here and there, but other than that, I never really had any crashes, so that was good. It seemed pretty solid, though I didn't play co-op, so I'm unsure what that site is. But that's pretty much Hellpoint. Overall, I don't think the game is bad. I actually enjoyed most of my time playing with it, just not really the combat part. On Steam, it's currently $35, which isn't outrageous by any means, but I would probably recommend waiting for it to drop to like $25 or wait for it to be fleshed out a bit more with some patches. If you're super into Souls game or like the whole sci-fi cosmic horror stuff, you'd probably like this, but don't go into it thinking it's like some brand new masterpiece. Now, I don't like to rate games on a scale because I think scales are skewed so much nowadays. Anything less than an 8 is probably assumed garbage. I will just say, yeah, it's good. It has issues, but I don't regret my purchase at all. It's got a good foundation, and I feel like this is going to be kind of like where Lords of the Fallen and the Surge 2 went, where this is like a starting point, and yeah, it's okay, it wasn't that great. But I feel like the next couple games, if they end up, keeping along the Souls line, will end up being better and better and better. Just like, Lords of the Fallen was pretty bad, the Surge was and then Surge 2 was fucking amazing. I hope this is kind of like in that same way. It's a really good first attempt. I really like the environments, I like the world building, I like the atmosphere. I just don't like the combat, and unfortunately, that's a huge part of Souls games. So yeah. Thank you all for watching, and good luck out there, hunters, and whatever you may be hunting.